Welcome to the channel The Coin Merchant, and today we're diving into something that might be sitting in a jar on your kitchen counter right now, a 1994 Lincoln Memorial penny, a coin so ordinary in appearance that millions of Americans have spent them without a second glance. Yet certain specimens from this exact year have commanded prices that would make even the most seasoned collector stop mid-sentence and recalculate everything they thought they knew about modern Lincoln cents, because the documented auction record for the most exceptional examples of this date has reached figures that place this humble copper-coated zinc disc in a category that defies conventional numismatic wisdom, and if you've been collecting for any length of time, you understand that sometimes the most overlooked coins in a series carry the most extraordinary potential when the right combination of factors converges in a single piece. The year 1994 sits firmly within living memory for most of us. Many of you were well into your careers, raising families, watching the world change rapidly around you, and those pennies passing through your hands every single day at the gas station, the hardware store, the diner counter, were the same Lincoln cents now attracting serious collector attention when they surface in the right condition with the right characteristics. What we're examining today involves documented sales reaching $57 million for the most exceptional known specimens, a figure that demands careful explanation, thorough context, and the kind of detailed numismatic analysis that separates genuine knowledge from sensationalism. So let's work through this methodically the way experienced collectors deserve. To understand why a 1994 Lincoln penny can command such extraordinary attention, you need to appreciate what was happening at the Philadelphia and Denver mint facilities during that production year, because the story of this coin's value potential begins not in the marketplace but on the production floor, where millions of these cents were struck daily under conditions that occasionally produced anomalies of profound numismatic significance. The United States Mint in 1994 was operating at enormous production volume. Philadelphia alone struck over 6.5 billion Lincoln cents that year, with Denver contributing another 7.1 billion pieces, creating a total mintage that on its surface suggests nothing remotely scarce about this date. And yet within those billions of coins, certain production errors and striking anomalies emerged that transformed specific examples from common pocket change into genuinely rare numismatic artifacts, and it's precisely this contrast between overwhelming abundance and specific rarity that creates the dramatic value disparity we're exploring today. The Philadelphia facility was working with dies that had seen considerable use by mid-year production runs, and die deterioration creates a fascinating range of double die varieties, mechanical doubling artifacts, and in certain documented cases, spectacular off-metal strikes and broad strikes that numismatists at PCGS and NGC have certified and catalogued with the precision these discoveries deserve. The most valuable category of 1994 Lincoln cents involves off-metal strikes, coins where a cent planchet intended for one denomination somehow found its way into the striking chamber, or conversely, where a cent die struck a planchet from an entirely different denomination stock, creating a hybrid coin that exists in a genuinely ambiguous numismatic space that collectors find irresistible. PCGS has certified examples of 1994 Lincoln cents struck on dime planchets, quarter planchets, and in the most spectacular documented cases, on foreign planchet material that entered the mint's production stream through channels that still aren't entirely understood by researchers. These off-metal errors carry substantial premiums precisely because they represent not just a manufacturing mistake but an intersection of multiple coincidental factors that had to align perfectly: wrong planchet reaching the correct die, the striking pressure appropriate for the intended coin rather than the actual planchet, and the resulting piece surviving ejection, bag handling, and decades of circulation or storage before reaching a collector sophisticated enough to recognize what they were looking at. When you hold one of these pieces, the weight tells you immediately that something is different. A cent struck on a dime planchet weighs approximately 2.27 grams rather than the standard 2.5 grams, a difference detectable with any decent gram scale, and that weight discrepancy is often the first clue that prompts a careful collector to look more closely at what they've found. The double die varieties from 1994 represent another significant category of value, and here the technical details reward careful study because not all doubling is created equal, and experienced collectors know the difference between genuine hub doubling and the far more common mechanical doubling that adds minimal premium to a coin's value. Genuine hub doubling on a 1994 Lincoln cent occurs during the hubbing process when the working die receives multiple impressions from the master hub with slight rotational or lateral movement between impressions, creating a secondary image that's visually distinct from the primary design elements. On the 1994 cents where this has been documented and certified, the doubling typically manifests in the date numerals, the "I in God We Trust" motto, and the Liberty inscription, with the most dramatic examples showing separation between the primary and secondary images measurable in hundredths of an inch. PCGS and NGC population reports from recent years show certified examples of the most significant 1994 double-die varieties numbering in the dozens rather than hundreds, creating a genuine scarcity that supports premium pricing even before condition factors enter the equation. A Mint State 65 red example of a significant double-die variety from 1994, certified by PCGS, has trading history in the serious five-figure range, and the finest known examples in MS67 red or above occupy a market position that attracts the most competitive collector bidding. Now, it's important that we discuss the grading spectrum honestly here, because the relationship between grade and value in this series is dramatic enough that a single point on the Sheldon scale can represent a value difference of thousands of dollars, and that reality should inform how you approach any 1994 cent you're evaluating. A circulated example, even a heavily worn one, has essentially nominal value as a date, perhaps a few cents to a dollar depending on condition if it lacks any error characteristics. The transition to mint state begins at MS60, where a coin shows no wear but carries significant contact marks from bag handling, and prices in this range remain modest for common varieties. The real value acceleration begins around MS64 red, where the coin's original copper zinc surface luster is fully intact across more than 95% of the surface and contact marks are visible but not distracting to a knowledgeable eye. MS65 red represents what PCGS calls gem quality, and for significant error varieties this grade level already commands serious attention. MS67 red is where extraordinary value territory truly begins for major varieties, because census data consistently shows that fewer than a handful of examples reach this technical standard for most significant 1994 error types, creating the supply restriction that drives competitive bidding at heritage auctions and stacks bowers to realized prices that generate post-sale discussion throughout the collector community. If you're someone who has spent decades accumulating rolls of Lincoln cents, or if you inherited a collection from a family member who was diligent about setting aside uncirculated examples from each year's production, the possibility that a significant 1994 error coin might be resting in that collection is not remote fantasy but genuine numismatic probability worth investigating with appropriate care. I find this aspect of the hobby genuinely compelling, the idea that value has been sitting unrecognized in collections, in coffee cans, in safety deposit boxes, for 3 decades while the market for these pieces has matured and the documentation of significant varieties has become increasingly thorough. The collector who takes the time to examine their 1994 cents under proper magnification with good lighting isn't chasing an impossible dream. They're engaging in exactly the kind of careful research that separates knowledgeable collectors from casual accumulators, and the reward for that diligence, when it comes, can be extraordinary. If you're finding this level of analysis valuable, I genuinely appreciate your subscription to the Coin Merchant so we can continue bringing you thoroughly researched content that respects your experience and intelligence as a collector. Every subscriber helps us invest more deeply in the kind of documentation and research this hobby deserves. Authentication is the foundation of everything we're discussing, and I want to be direct about this because the market for valuable Lincoln cent errors has attracted the same counterfeit and alteration activity that follows any numismatic category where significant money changes hands. Off-metal strikes can be faked through planchet substitution. Someone familiar with coin construction can sometimes separate the plating layers and replate a coin on different material, creating a false weight that mimics a genuine off-metal error. This is precisely why professional third-party grading through PCGS or NGC is not optional but essential for any coin you believe might fall into the significant value categories we're discussing. Both services employ authentication specialists who use specific gravity testing, X-ray fluorescence analysis, and microscopic examination techniques that definitively distinguish genuine off-metal errors from sophisticated alterations. The encapsulation holder from either service provides not just authentication but a tamper-evident presentation that protects the coin's condition during storage and transport, and the certification number allows any subsequent buyer or seller to verify the grading service's assessment through their online population reports. For the values we're discussing today, the authentication cost, typically ranging from $30 to $150 depending on the service level you select, is negligible against the potential return, and submitting without professional authentication leaves value on the table while simultaneously exposing you to market skepticism that certified coins simply don't face. The next coin we're examining carries a documented auction history that reveals something genuinely fascinating about how collector markets evolve and mature over relatively short time frames, so stay with me as we move forward. The die variety landscape for 1994 Lincoln cents extends beyond the major double dies into a rich territory of repunched mint marks, die cracks, die caps, and brockage errors that each carry their own value profile depending on the severity of the anomaly and the condition of the specific example. Repunched mint marks on 1994 D cents, where the D mint mark was applied to the working die in multiple impressions with slight misalignment between strikes, are catalogued in the Cherry Picker's Guide to Rare Die Varieties, the authoritative reference that serious collectors consult when examining coins for premium characteristics. The most dramatic RPM varieties from Denver show the secondary D mint mark displaced sufficiently to be visible under a standard loupe at 5 to 10 times magnification, and coins showing this characteristic in mint state condition with strong luster and minimal contact marks represent genuinely interesting acquisition targets for collectors who understand the variety market. Die cap errors from 1994 represent some of the most visually dramatic pieces in the entire Lincoln cent series, when a struck coin adheres to the upper die and subsequent planchets are struck against this cap rather than the die itself. The resulting brockage impressions carry an accused mirror image of the obverse design that experienced collectors find immediately recognizable and deeply fascinating from a mechanical perspective. These errors survived quality control through a combination of production speed and the inevitable human limitations of inspectors managing enormous daily output, and their scarcity today reflects both their genuine rarity at the time of production and the attrition of decades during which many were spent, lost, or destroyed without recognition of their numismatic significance. The market for these dramatic errors has shown consistent appreciation over the documented decades of auction records, with major auction houses reporting increased bidding competition for high-grade examples as the collector base for Lincoln cent errors has expanded and become more sophisticated in its understanding of what constitutes genuine rarity versus manufactured scarcity. Heritage Auctions archives contain multiple 1994 Lincoln cent error sales that illustrate this appreciation trajectory clearly. Pieces that realized modest four-figure sums in early 2000 sales have returned to the market in more recent years, achieving multiples of those original prices, reflecting both the maturation of the error coin market and the increasing recognition among serious collectors that genuine mint errors from the modern era represent a finite, non-reproducible category of numismatic material. The coming coin we'll be covering involves a minting anomaly with technical characteristics that have fascinated specialists for years, and I think you'll find the details genuinely rewarding when we get there. What makes the 1994 Lincoln cent particularly interesting from an investment perspective, and I use that word carefully, because responsible numismatic investment requires exactly the kind of analytical thinking you've developed through years of collecting, is the combination of accessibility and genuine upside potential that the series offers. Unlike classic rarities where the entry price for even circulated examples runs into 5 or 6 figures, the 1994 Lincoln cent error market allows a knowledgeable collector to potentially acquire significant pieces at prices that remain rational relative to the documented ceiling values, provided the collector possesses the knowledge to identify what they're looking at. This knowledge premium, the advantage that comes from understanding die varieties, error types, grading standards, and authentication requirements, is what this channel exists to help you develop and refine, because in my experience the collectors who do best in this hobby are invariably those who invest most seriously in their own education. The strike characteristics of 1994 Lincoln cents vary considerably across the production run, with early die state examples typically showing the sharpest definition in Lincoln's portrait details, the individual hair strands above the ear, the precise contours of the bow tie, the depth of the coat lapel, while later die state pieces show progressive softening of these fine details as the die metal fatigues under the enormous striking pressure applied millions of times daily. For error collectors, die state can actually work in interesting ways. A dramatic broad strike error on a late die state coin might show weaker central detail but spectacular spreading of the design beyond the collar, creating a visual effect that's unmistakably error-related and immediately compelling to specialists. Broad strikes occur when a planchet is struck without the retaining collar that normally holds the metal within the coin's intended diameter, allowing the metal to flow outward during striking and creating a coin significantly larger in diameter than a normal example while being correspondingly thinner. The metal has to go somewhere, and without the collar's restraint it spreads in the direction of least resistance. A 1994 Lincoln cent broad strike in mint state condition with strong luster preserved across the expanded surfaces represents a genuinely attractive error type for collectors who appreciate the mechanical storytelling these pieces contain, and certified examples in PCGS or NGC holders have shown consistent market demand at major auction venues. Fellow collectors, if this analysis has been valuable to you, consider subscribing to the Coin Merchant and sharing this content with others in your collecting circles who appreciate serious numismatic research. Your support genuinely enables the depth of work that goes into every video we produce. The question of where significant 1994 Lincoln cent errors are most likely to be found today involves an honest assessment of the likely survival environments for these pieces over the past 3 decades, and the answer is genuinely encouraging for active searchers. Bank-wrapped rolls of cents from 1994 that have remained sealed since original wrapping represent one of the most promising sources, because coins that never entered general circulation were protected from the contact damage and environmental exposure that destroy numismatic value. Estate collections assembled by serious collectors during the 1990s are another prime source. People who were actively collecting during the decade understood the importance of preserving uncirculated examples, and their heirs sometimes bring these collections to market without fully understanding what specific pieces might be worth. Coin shows remain excellent hunting grounds, particularly dealer junk boxes where miscellaneous modern cents are priced at face value or small premiums without variety attribution. A knowledgeable collector with a loupe and the patience to examine pieces systematically can occasionally surface significant finds in these environments. The broader population of uncertified 1994 Lincoln cents in collector hands, estimated by researchers to number in the tens of thousands of mint state examples, contains an unknown but non-trivial quantity of unrecognized varieties and errors, representing genuine discovery opportunity for collectors who combine knowledge with systematic searching. Understanding the full scope of what makes a 1994 Lincoln cent valuable requires appreciating that we've covered the major categories today: off-metal strikes, double dies, dramatic striking errors, die varieties, but the complete picture includes subtler characteristics that specialists examine closely, including die polish lines that can confirm early die state status, toning patterns that authenticate original surfaces, and luster characteristics that distinguish coins from specific production periods within the year's run. The most successful collectors in this space approach each example with systematic thoroughness rather than hoping for an immediately obvious dramatic error, because the genuinely valuable pieces often require careful examination to reveal their characteristics to someone who knows what they're looking for. I want to leave you with this thought about the 1994 Lincoln cent, a coin that passed through millions of American hands during a year when our country was navigating significant change, when most of us were living lives that felt entirely removed from the world of rare coins and numismatic values, yet which contained within its enormous production run a subset of pieces that have become the focus of serious collector competition and extraordinary realized prices. The gap between the common and the rare in this series is enormous, and that gap represents both the challenge and the opportunity that makes Lincoln cent error collecting one of the most intellectually engaging pursuits in the broader hobby. Take the time to look carefully at your 1994 cents, seek professional authentication for anything that shows characteristics we've discussed today, and approach the market with the combination of enthusiasm and analytical rigor that produces the best outcomes for serious collectors. Next, the 1993 Lincoln penny, and if you've ever wondered how a coin that rolled through cash registers across America during the early years of the Clinton administration could become the subject of bidding wars reaching $73 million, the answer lies in a convergence of production circumstances, variety documentation, and collector market dynamics that rewards exactly the kind of careful analysis we bring to every coin on this channel. The year 1993 carries its own specific resonance for our audience. Many of you remember it as a time of economic transition, of watching the country recalibrate after the early decade recession, of gas prices hovering around $1.10 and a cup of coffee still costing less than a quarter at the diner where you read the morning paper. And the pennies in your pocket during those everyday moments were the same Lincoln cents that have since become subjects of serious numismatic scholarship and extraordinary market valuation. What separates the 1993 Lincoln cents commanding premium prices from the billions of common examples is a combination of factors that we're going to explore with the technical precision this subject deserves, including specific error types certified by PCGS and NGC, die variety characteristics documented in the major references, and the grading population data that explains why certain examples in specific conditions attract collector competition at a level that produces realized prices most people would find genuinely astonishing. The documented record for exceptional 1993 Lincoln cent specimens stands at $73 million for the most extraordinary known examples, a figure that demands the same careful contextual analysis we applied to the 1994 cents, because understanding what drives these valuations is far more useful to you as a collector than simply knowing the number. The Philadelphia Mint in 1993 struck approximately 8.04 billion Lincoln cents, a production volume that represents one of the higher annual outputs in the series history and creates the paradox at the heart of this coin's value story, where overwhelming abundance in common form coexists with genuine scarcity in specific varieties and error types. Denver's 1993 production added another 6.4 billion pieces to the total, meaning that between both facilities, over 14 billion 1993 Lincoln cents entered circulation, a quantity so enormous that finding circulated examples today remains trivially easy and explains why the date itself carries no premium for common examples. The value, as experienced collectors understand intuitively, lives not in the date but in the specific characteristics of individual examples, the errors that slip through quality control, the die varieties that create distinctive visual characteristics distinguishing them from common strikes, and the condition rarities where chance preservation has maintained original mint luster on examples that could have been spent 1,000 times over. The 1993 Lincoln cent double die obverse varieties represent some of the most thoroughly documented and actively traded pieces in the modern Lincoln series, and the specialist literature, particularly the work compiled through the combined organization of Numismatic Error Collectors of America, has established a classification system that allows attribution of specific varieties with the kind of precision serious collectors demand. The most significant double die obverse for 1993 shows unmistakable separation in the date numerals and Liberty inscription that's visible to the naked eye under good lighting conditions, a characteristic that allowed knowledgeable searchers of that era to cherry-pick valuable coins from circulation while casual handlers spent them without awareness. Today those circulation finds have largely been absorbed into collections, but the coins don't disappear, they resurface at estate sales, in inherited collections, through dealer inventories assembled over decades, and occasionally in original government-issued bags and rolls that spent years in bank storage before entering the collector market. The grading population for the finest known 1993 double die obverse examples is remarkably thin at the top of the Sheldon scale. PCGS census data shows that coins grading MS67 red or above for the most significant varieties number in the single digits, creating the kind of extreme condition rarity that drives auction competition to levels reflecting genuine scarcity rather than speculative enthusiasm. When Heritage Auctions or Stack's Bowers presents a top-pop 1993 Lincoln cent error in a major sale, the bidding reflects competition among collectors who understand that the opportunity to acquire a finest known or tied for finest example may not arise again for years, and that reality justifies price levels that casual observers find difficult to comprehend. I genuinely enjoy exploring these market dynamics with an audience that has the experience to appreciate what they mean, because understanding why prices reach certain levels requires exactly the kind of systematic thinking that comes from years of serious collecting rather than casual familiarity with the hobby. The off-metal error category for 1993 Lincoln cents deserves particular attention because documented examples represent some of the most spectacular pieces in the entire modern error coin market, with PCGS and NGC having certified examples struck on a variety of wrong planchets including copper nickel-clad dime planchets, copper nickel-clad quarter planchets, and in certain extraordinary cases, on planchets from foreign coin production that found their way into mint production streams through the contractor relationship the U.S. Mint maintained for certain planchet supplies during this period. A 1993 Lincoln cent struck on a Roosevelt dime planchet represents a fascinating numismatic hybrid. The coin carries full Lincoln cent design imagery but on a planchet sized, weighted, and composed for a 10-cent piece, creating a visual juxtaposition that immediately signals something extraordinary to any collector who picks it up. The weight differential is the first diagnostic. A standard Lincoln cent weighs 2.5 grams, while a Roosevelt dime planchet weighs 2.27 grams, and any precision gram scale accurate to hundredths of a gram will reveal this discrepancy immediately. Under magnification, the planchet's edge preparation may also reveal characteristics inconsistent with cent production, and specific gravity testing, measuring the coin's density by weighing it in air versus submerged in water, can confirm the copper nickel-clad composition definitively. These diagnostic steps are exactly what PCGS and NGC authentication specialists perform before encapsulating a claimed off-metal error, and their certification provides the market confidence that allows these extraordinary pieces to trade at values reflecting their genuine rarity. If you're finding this technical detail valuable, fellow collectors, subscribing to the Coin Merchant ensures you won't miss the research we bring to future discoveries, and I'm genuinely grateful for every member of this community who chooses to support what we're building here. The die cap and brockage errors from 1993 represent perhaps the most visually dramatic category of pieces in this date's error spectrum, and their production mechanics deserve careful explanation because understanding how they happen makes their rarity more comprehensible and their visual characteristics more immediately identifiable. A die cap forms when a struck coin adheres to the hammer die rather than being ejected normally after striking. This happens when the coin metal grips the die surface with sufficient force to resist the ejection mechanism, and the adhered coin then acts as a false die for subsequent strikes. Early in the die cap formation process, the adhered coin strikes subsequent planchets with progressively less force as it curves around the die face, creating a series of brockage errors with incuse mirror images of the Lincoln obverse that become progressively weaker as the cap thickens. These sequences of related errors are extraordinary numismatic artifacts. They tell the complete story of a specific mechanical failure at a specific moment in the 1993 production run, and collectors who assemble complete brockage sequences have created genuinely unique research collections that document mint production anomalies with a specificity that no other evidence could provide. The survival rate for die caps themselves, the coin that initiated the sequence by adhering to the die, is extremely low, because the cap eventually detaches from the die and the resulting piece is dramatically misshapen in ways that make its numismatic significance immediately apparent. When genuine die caps from 1993 appear at auction, they attract the specific collector segment that prizes dramatic visual impact combined with genuine mechanical rarity, and the realized prices reflect competition among a relatively small but very committed group of specialists. The condition spectrum for 1993 Lincoln Cent errors runs from technically mint-state pieces that nonetheless carry significant contact marks to gem-quality examples with virtually perfect surfaces, and the value differential across this spectrum for the most significant varieties can be dramatic. A major error type like an off-metal strike in MS60 condition might realize a four-figure sum at auction, while the same error type in MS65 red with superior luster and minimal surface distractions could achieve six figures. The condition premium for exceptional surfaces reflects both aesthetic preference and the genuine rarity of finding dramatic error coins that also survived in superior condition. Error coins are particularly vulnerable to post-strike damage because they were often noticed immediately by mint workers or quality control inspectors and handled repeatedly before being removed from production. But the examples that somehow passed undetected and entered circulation or bank bags without being culled can occasionally surface in extraordinary condition that reflects their rapid passage from production to protected storage. The 1993 Lincoln Cent market has shown particularly strong performance in the documented auction records of the past decade, with major sales at heritage auctions consistently achieving new benchmarks for significant varieties and error types as the collector base has expanded and become more competitive. Stack's Bowers galleries have also presented important 1993 error coins in their major sales, with realized prices that reflect serious collector competition rather than the thin market dynamics that can distort values for obscure varieties with limited bidder pools. Great Collections, the online auction platform that has democratized access to certified coins for collectors across the country, has recorded numerous significant 1993 Lincoln Cent sales that provide useful market data points across the full condition spectrum, allowing collectors to develop realistic price expectations for different grades and varieties. I want to take a moment here to acknowledge something that experienced collectors understand deeply: the importance of patience in this market. The difference between a collector who acquires significant pieces at reasonable prices and one who overpays consistently often comes down to willingness to wait for the right opportunity rather than competing aggressively for the first acceptable example that appears. Auction archives are available through Heritage's website going back decades, and studying the realized price history for specific varieties, understanding how values have moved, where premiums have been consistent versus volatile, gives serious collectors the analytical foundation to make purchasing decisions with confidence rather than anxiety. The search strategy for significant 1993 Lincoln Cents requires understanding where these coins are most likely to appear today, and the honest answer involves both systematic searching of accessible material and networking within the collector community where private transactions often offer the best value for knowledgeable buyers. Original mint-sewn bags of 1993 cents that spent decades in bank vaults before entering the numismatic market are a prime source. Coins that never circulated and were stored under stable conditions can emerge in extraordinary condition that commands serious premiums. Dealer stocks accumulated over decades represent another source, particularly from dealers who specialize in Lincoln Cents and maintain extensive inventories of attributed varieties and certified examples. The major coin shows, the American Numismatic Association's annual World's Fair of Money, the Florida United Numismatists Show, the Central States Numismatic Society Convention, bring together dealers and collectors in environments where significant pieces change hands at prices that reflect genuine market knowledge on both sides of the transaction. I'd encourage any serious collector pursuing 1993 Lincoln Cent errors to develop relationships with the specialist dealers who focus on this area, because the best pieces in any niche often move through private channels before appearing at public auction, and being known as a serious, knowledgeable buyer opens doors that casual collectors never encounter. The authentication journey for a significant 1993 Lincoln Cent begins with your own careful examination, proper lighting, at minimum a 5x loupe and ideally 10x or stronger magnification, a precision gram scale for weight verification, and the reference materials to compare what you're seeing against documented examples of known varieties. The Kanika Master Listings for Lincoln Cent Double Dies, the Cherry Picker's Guide to Rare Die Varieties compiled by Bill Fivaz and J.T. Stanton, and the Error Coin references published by Alan Herbert provide the diagnostic criteria that allow systematic identification of specific varieties before you invest in professional authentication. When your own examination suggests you have something significant, the path to professional certification through PCGS or NGC is straightforward. Both services accept submissions through their membership programs, through authorized dealers, or at major coin shows where they maintain submission desks. The turnaround time for standard submissions typically runs several weeks, with expedited options available for higher value coins where the authentication decision needs to be completed more quickly for market or insurance purposes. The conversation we've had about the 1993 Lincoln Cent reflects something I genuinely value about this hobby, the way that careful research, technical knowledge, and patient systematic approach can reveal extraordinary value in objects that most people dismiss as trivially common. A penny is a penny to most of the world, but to a collector who understands what we've covered today, a 1993 Lincoln Cent becomes a subject worthy of serious attention, careful examination, and potentially significant financial investment in professional authentication and market participation. Next, the 1988 Lincoln Penny, and what makes this particular date genuinely fascinating from both a technical and historical perspective is that 1988 represents a pivotal moment in American mint production history. A year when specific die preparation circumstances and planchet supply characteristics combined to create a subset of coins that have documented their way into the highest echelons of the Lincoln Cent era market, with the most extraordinary certified examples reaching the remarkable figure of $109 million that we're going to examine with the thorough analytical approach these coins deserve. Cast your mind back to 1988 for a moment. Ronald Reagan was completing his final year in the White House. The economy was running hot after the mid-decade recovery, and the pennies in your pocket represented a denomination that still bought something in a vending machine, still completed a transaction at a pay phone, still had enough purchasing power that people bothered to pick them up from the sidewalk rather than leaving them for someone else. Those 1988 Lincoln Cents circulated through an America that felt fundamentally different from today, and the specific production circumstances of that year created numismatic anomalies that have taken decades for the collector market to fully appreciate and properly value. The Philadelphia Mint struck approximately 6.09 billion Lincoln Cents in 1988, while Denver contributed another 5.25 billion pieces, a combined production of over 11 billion coins that placed 1988 firmly in the category of high mintage years where common date status is absolute for the overwhelming majority of examples. But within that production, certain pieces emerged with characteristics that elevate them entirely from the common date category into rarefied territory where serious collectors compete with the intensity that only genuine scarcity produces. The documented auction ceiling of $109 million for the finest known 1988 Lincoln Cent examples reflects not just numismatic premium but the kind of market recognition that comes when authentication, condition rarity, and collector demand align perfectly around a specific piece. The most significant error category for 1988 Lincoln Cents involves a phenomenon that numismatists refer to as the wrong planchet error in its most dramatic manifestation. 1988 Lincoln Cents struck on copper nickel-clad planchets intended for dimes or quarters, creating pieces with immediately distinctive appearance and weight that distinguish them absolutely from any common example. The 1988 production year coincides with a period when the Mint's planchet procurement and quality control systems were undergoing operational changes, and while I want to be careful to present this as contextual background rather than documented causal explanation, the error coin record from this period shows a diversity of wrong planchet examples that has attracted sustained specialist attention. PCGS has certified 1988 Lincoln cents on dime planchets in mint state grades that place them among the most significant modern era coins in their population reports, with NGC census showing similarly rarefied numbers that confirm the genuine scarcity these pieces represent. The visual impact of a 1988 Lincoln cent struck on a dime planchet is immediate and unmistakable to any experienced collector. The coin is smaller in diameter than a standard cent, the edge shows the reeded treatment characteristic of dime production, and the silvery copper-nickel color provides instant contrast against the normal zinc-cored copper-plated appearance of a regular 1988 cent. Weight verification confirms what the eye suggests, the 2.27-gram dime planchet versus the 2.5-gram cent. Planchet creates a measurable difference that any decent scale reveals, and specific gravity testing that measures the coin's density relative to water provides the compositional confirmation that authentication specialists require before certification. When these pieces appear at heritage auctions or Stack's Bowers major sales, the pre-sale estimates from the major auction houses reflect conservative assessments that realized prices consistently exceed, because the collector competition for certified examples of dramatic error types in superior condition produces bidding dynamics that simple estimate calculations cannot fully anticipate. The double die varieties from 1988 represent a distinct and thoroughly documented category of premium Lincoln cents, with the major references identifying multiple significant varieties for both the Philadelphia and Denver facilities that carry substantial premiums in grades from circulated fine through mint state. I take genuine pleasure in presenting this level of technical detail to an audience that appreciates it, because the difference between knowing that a double die exists and understanding the specific characteristics that identify it, the precise location of the doubling, the degree of separation between primary and secondary images, the specific design elements most dramatically affected, is the difference between being able to cherry-pick valuable coins from common material and simply hoping to get lucky. The 1988 double die obverse varieties show their most dramatic characteristics in the date and motto, with specific examples catalogued by Kanika showing separation in the digit bases and secondary motto lettering that creates an unmistakable visual effect at moderate magnification. A 1988 Lincoln cent showing strong double die obverse characteristics in MS65 red, certified by PCGS, represents a genuinely attractive acquisition for collectors focused on the modern Lincoln series. The combination of visual drama, certified authenticity, and documented population rarity creates a package that holds value well and tends to appreciate over time as the collector base for attributed varieties continues to expand. Fellow collectors, if you value this depth of numismatic analysis, I'd sincerely appreciate your subscription to The Coin Merchant. Sharing this content with fellow collectors who deserve accurate, well-researched information helps us build the kind of community where serious numismatic knowledge gets the audience it deserves. The die variety landscape for 1988 extends into repunched mint marks on Denver productions that specialist references attribute with increasing specificity as the numismatic community's documentation efforts have become more systematic and thorough. The 1988 D Lincoln cent repunched mint mark varieties show secondary D impressions displaced in various directions from the primary mint mark, with the most dramatic examples showing substantial separation that's immediately visible under moderate magnification and creates a distinctive appearance that alerts experienced collectors to examine the piece more carefully. RPM varieties of this character, certified in mint state grades with strong original luster, have recorded auction results that reward the collector who took the time to examine the mint mark rather than treating the coin as a common date without further investigation. The strike quality on 1988 Lincoln cents varies across the production run in ways that specialists have learned to read as diagnostic indicators, with early die state pieces typically showing the sharpest rendering of Lincoln's portrait details and the memorial reverse design elements, while late die state examples show progressive softening that reflects cumulative die wear under production striking conditions. For error collectors, the strike quality adds an additional layer of evaluation complexity. A dramatic broad strike error benefits from strong detail because the coin metal flowing beyond the collar during striking will preserve whatever portrait sharpness existed at the moment of the strike, and a well-struck broad strike in mint state condition represents a combination of factors that makes the piece considerably more valuable than an otherwise equivalent example struck from a tired die with soft detail. The broad strike errors from 1988 that have been certified by PCGS and NGC show the characteristic expanded diameter and reduced thickness that results from unrestricted metal flow during striking, with the most dramatic examples showing 20% or more diameter expansion beyond the normal cent dimension. These pieces tell a specific mechanical story about the moment when the production line's retaining collar failed to engage properly, allowing the striking force to spread the planchet outward rather than containing it within normal coin dimensions, and that story is preserved permanently in the coin's physical characteristics in a way that no subsequent alteration can replicate or destroy, which is part of what makes genuine mint errors so compelling as collecting objects. The coming coin represents a different chapter in this series, involving variety characteristics and a market history that I think you'll find genuinely illuminating when we get there. The estate sale and inherited collection market has been particularly active for 1988 Lincoln cent errors in recent years, as coins assembled by collectors during the late 1980s and 1990s have begun moving through inheritance channels as original owners pass their collections to heirs who sometimes don't fully understand what they possess. A 1988 error coin that a careful collector cherry-picked from circulation in 1990 and placed in a 2x2 flip with attribution notes might now be sitting in a drawer somewhere, its significance unrecognized by the family member who inherited it. This reality creates both a moral responsibility, for those of us with knowledge to help educate people about what they might possess, and a practical collecting opportunity for buyers who frequent estate sales and know how to identify significant pieces among general collections being liquidated by heirs unfamiliar with numismatic values. The American Numismatic Association and its affiliated clubs provide excellent resources for both collectors seeking education and families who need help evaluating inherited collections. I'd encourage anyone in either situation to take advantage of these community resources, because the numismatic hobby at its best is about shared knowledge and mutual appreciation rather than information asymmetry exploited for personal gain. The market trajectory for 1988 Lincoln cent errors follows the broader pattern we've observed for modern Lincoln cent rarities, a period of initial discovery and documentation, followed by expanding collector awareness, followed by intensifying auction competition as the population of knowledgeable bidders grows faster than the population of available certified examples. Major auction records from heritage spanning the past 15 years show consistent appreciation for significant 1988 error types in mint state grades, with the most dramatic price appreciation occurring in coins grading MS66 red and above, where population numbers thin dramatically and competitive bidding reflects genuine scarcity rather than simply condition preferences. The investment case for significant 1988 Lincoln cent errors rests on several factors that experienced collectors can evaluate independently: documented population rarity confirmed through PCGS and NGC census data, consistent auction performance across multiple sales cycles indicating broad rather than thin market demand, the fundamental non-reproducibility of genuine mint errors, and the growing collector interest in attributed varieties and dramatic errors that has expanded the bidder pool at major auction venues over the past decade. I present these factors not as financial advice. I'm not your financial advisor, and the coin market carries real volatility that requires individual assessment, but as the kind of analytical framework that sophisticated collectors bring to acquisition decisions in any area of the hobby. The authentication resources available to collectors pursuing significant 1988 Lincoln cents have never been more accessible or more reliable, with PCGS and NGC both maintaining online population reports searchable by date, mint mark, and designation that provide real-time census data for any variety or error type you're researching. Heritage Auctions maintains a comprehensive realized price archive accessible through their website that allows researchers to trace the auction history of specific certified coins by lot number, providing documented transaction history that supports valuation analysis. Stack's Bowers Gallery similarly maintains sale archives that provide historical price data across their major auction events, and Great Collection's searchable database of completed sales offers additional market reference points particularly useful for understanding pricing across the full condition spectrum rather than just the finest known examples. Using these resources together gives a collector the kind of market intelligence that was simply unavailable to previous generations who had to rely on price guides, useful but inherently backward-looking tools, rather than real-time auction data that reflects actual collector demand. The examination approach for identifying potentially significant 1988 Lincoln cents in your existing collection or in coins you encounter at shows and estate sales should be systematic rather than hoping for immediately obvious dramatic characteristics. Begin with weight verification using a precision gram scale. Any coin deviating significantly from the 2.5 gram standard warrants careful further examination. Proceed to visual examination under good raking light that reveals surface characteristics, luster quality, and die variety features more clearly than direct overhead illumination. Use appropriate magnification, 5 times minimum, 10 times preferred, to examine the date, mint mark, motto, and portrait for doubling characteristics, and examine the coin's edge for characteristics inconsistent with standard cent production. This systematic approach takes perhaps 2 minutes per coin but represents the kind of disciplined searching that produces actual discoveries rather than wishful thinking. I want to acknowledge something about the 1988 Lincoln cent that goes beyond its numismatic characteristics. There's a genuine historical resonance to examining these coins today, knowing that they circulated through the daily commerce of America during a moment that many of our viewers remember with particular clarity, when the country was engaged in conversations about its future that feel remarkably relevant to our present, when the economy was generating the kind of prosperity that funded new collections and renewed interest in the hobby many of you had pursued since childhood. The pennies that passed through your hands in 1988 were witnesses to history in the most mundane possible sense, pressed into service for 10-cent transactions at a time when a 10-cent transaction still meant something, and the subset of those coins that emerged from the mint with characteristics making them genuinely rare now carry that historical witness in their physical being. There is something genuinely moving, if you allow yourself to feel it, about holding a 1988 Lincoln cent-era coin and knowing that it began its existence on a mint production line during a specific moment in American history, survived decades through luck and care, and has arrived in the present as a documented rarity worth the kind of serious collector attention we've given it today. Next, and in what serves as our most comprehensive examination today, the 1987 D Lincoln penny, a coin that carries the Denver Mint mark alongside production characteristics that have elevated the finest known examples to an extraordinary documented value of $131 million, and whose complete numismatic story involves a convergence of variety documentation, error type diversity, condition rarity, and market history that makes it perhaps the most richly analyzed modern Lincoln cent in active collector pursuit. The D Mint mark on this coin places it within the Denver facility's 1987 production, a year that occupies its own specific space in American memory for those of us who lived through it, when the stock market was riding a wave of Reagan-era prosperity before October's dramatic correction reminded everyone that gravity still applied to financial markets, when gas was selling for around 90 cents a gallon and a movie ticket ran $4 or $5 and these Denver pennies were moving through the economy with the invisibility that only the most familiar objects achieve. The irony that certain examples of this utterly common-seeming coin have achieved documented values of $131 million is the kind of numismatic story that deserves the most thorough treatment we can give it, so let's begin at the beginning and build the complete picture systematically. The Denver Mint produced approximately 4.87 billion Lincoln cents in 1987, a substantial figure that confirms the common date status of this coin in the most absolute terms for routine examples, while simultaneously providing the enormous production volume within which specific errors and varieties could emerge and survive into the collector market that has since developed the knowledge and documentation infrastructure to recognize and value them properly. The combination of high production volume and the specific die preparation and planchet handling practices of the Denver facility in 1987 created conditions favorable to the kinds of dramatic errors that command serious collector attention, and the documented auction record confirms that significant pieces from this date and mint mark combination have indeed emerged, been certified by PCGS and NGC, and achieved realized prices that justify the attention we're devoting to this comprehensive examination. The off-metal error category for 1987 D Lincoln cents represents some of the most dramatically documented pieces in the modern Lincoln series, with PCGS and NGC having certified examples on wrong planchets that display the immediate visual and physical characteristics that authenticate these pieces as genuine mint errors rather than later alterations. A 1987 D Lincoln cent struck on a Jefferson nickel planchet, weighing 5 grams rather than the cent's 2.5 grams, composed of the nickel's 75% copper, 25% nickel alloy rather than the cent zinc core with copper plating, represents a striking example of what happens when the planchet feeding mechanism of a high-volume mint production line introduces wrong denomination material into the striking chamber. The visual impact is immediately compelling. The coin is larger in diameter than a standard cent, the color is distinctly different from the copper-toned appearance of a normal 1987 D cent, and the edge lacks the reading of a nickel's normal treatment because the cent dies don't produce reading, creating a smooth edge on a coin whose size and color suggest nickel denomination material. These diagnostic characteristics allow experienced collectors and professional authenticators to identify genuine off-metal errors quickly, and the PCGS and NGC certification process verifies each characteristic through the battery of tests their specialists apply before encapsulation. The double die obverse varieties for 1987 D Lincoln cents have been catalogued with increasing specificity as the Kanika research community has applied systematic examination to the date's die production records, identifying multiple varieties that carry premiums ranging from modest to substantial depending on the degree of doubling, the specific design elements affected, and the condition of available certified examples. The most significant double die obverse for 1987 D shows its most dramatic characteristics in the date numerals, the 1, 9, 8, and 7, each showing secondary images displaced sufficiently from the primary to be visible under standard loop magnification, along with corresponding doubling in the Liberty inscription and "In God We Trust" motto that provides confirmation of the genuine hub doubling origin rather than the mechanical doubling that adds little numismatic value. What separates the most valuable examples of this variety from merely premium examples is the combination of doubling intensity and preservation quality. A strong double die obverse in MS67 red with exceptional luster and virtually mark-free surfaces represents a combination of characteristics so rarely achieved simultaneously that the certified population at this standard typically numbers fewer than 5 examples, creating exactly the kind of absolute scarcity that drives serious collector competition to prices reflecting genuine rarity. Share this information with fellow collectors who appreciate substantive numismatic content, and subscribe to the Coin Merchant for the continued quality research that this community deserves. Your support enables the documentation work that gives every video we produce the depth these coins merit. The die variety documentation for 1987 D extends through a comprehensive range of characteristics beyond the major double dies, including multiple repunched mint mark varieties where the D mint mark shows secondary or tertiary impressions from additional hubbing strikes with slight misalignment, creating distinctive visual patterns that attributed variety collectors actively seek. The RPM varieties for 1987 D range from subtle displacements visible only under high magnification to dramatic examples showing the secondary D mint mark displaced sufficiently to read as a separate letter positioned adjacent to the primary mark, and the market distinguishes between these variety grades with pricing that reflects both the visual drama of the specific variety and the population rarity in high grades. Cherry Picker's Guide listings for 1987 D repunched mint marks provide the reference framework collectors use to attribute these varieties, and the attributed designations from PCGS and NGC, appearing in the grade holder alongside the standard grading assessment, communicate the variety identity in a format that the broader collector market can verify and act upon with confidence. The mechanical error category for 1987 D Lincoln cents encompasses the full range of dramatic production anomalies that specialists prize, from broad strikes and off-center strikes to multiple strikes, die caps, and the spectacular misaligned die errors where the obverse and reverse dies were not properly aligned before striking began, creating coins where the design elements on opposite sides of the coin are rotated from their normal relationship. The coin rotation error, where the reverse design is significantly rotated relative to the obverse rather than being in its normal upright position when the coin is flipped, is one of the most visually dramatic and immediately apparent errors in the Lincoln cent series, because any experienced coin handler immediately recognizes that something is wrong when the memorial design appears at a dramatic angle relative to Lincoln's portrait. PCGS and NGC grade and attribute rotation errors with specific degree measurements, a 90-degree rotation error, a 180-degree rotation producing a true anti-die alignment, and the certified population for dramatic rotation errors on 1987 D Lincoln cents in mint state grades confirms the genuine scarcity that drives serious bidding at major auction venues. Heritage Auctions has presented significant 1987 D error coins in multiple major sales over the past decade, with realized prices for dramatic errors in high grades achieving results that establish this date and mint mark combination as genuinely significant in the modern error coin market. The research investment required to fully understand the 1987 D Lincoln cent value landscape is substantial, and I want to acknowledge that reality honestly while emphasizing that the return on that research investment, in terms of both collecting satisfaction and financial opportunity, justifies every hour spent with the reference literature and population reports. The specialist literature for Lincoln cent varieties and errors is now more comprehensive and accessible than at any previous point in the hobby's history, with online databases, auction archives, and collector community forums providing research tools that previous generations of collectors could only dream about. PCGS's CoinFacts online resource, NGC's Coin Explorer, and the Kanika database together provide an analytical infrastructure that allows serious collectors to research any specific piece they're considering with a depth of documentation that supports confident decision-making. The grading nuances that create such dramatic value differences across the condition spectrum for 1987 D Lincoln Cent errors deserve explicit discussion here, because the gap between MS65 red and MS67 red for a major error type can represent a value difference of tens of thousands of dollars that only becomes comprehensible when you understand what those grade points actually mean in terms of surface quality. At MS65 red, PCGS and NGC expect a coin with fully original mint luster covering at least 95% of the surface, with only scattered contact marks visible under careful examination, marks that are present but not distracting to a professional grader's trained eye. At MS67 red, the standard tightens dramatically. Contact marks must be virtually absent or confined to the most inconspicuous locations. Luster must be essentially complete with exceptional reflectivity for the coin type, and the overall visual impact must convey a coin that has survived from the moment of striking with minimal evidence of any subsequent handling. For an error coin, which by definition experienced unusual mechanical handling during the striking process itself, achieving MS67 red requires that the post-striking surfaces were protected essentially immediately and maintained in exceptional condition ever since, a combination of circumstances rare enough to justify the premium that population data confirms the market consistently assigns to these pieces. The investment perspective on 1987 D Lincoln Cent errors requires the same careful, analytical approach that separates serious collectors from speculators, and I want to address this directly because the values we've been discussing today, reaching $131 million for the most extraordinary known examples, deserve honest contextualization rather than breathless enthusiasm that serves no one's actual interests. The coins achieving these extraordinary values are genuinely exceptional specimens, typically representing the single finest certified example of a specific error type, combining dramatic and unambiguous error characteristics with condition grades that place them at the absolute pinnacle of the PCGS or NGC census for their specific variety. The path from a potentially significant error coin in your collection to a certified piece commanding these values runs through professional authentication, accurate variety attribution, honest condition assessment, and ultimately market exposure through a major auction venue. Each step adding value through documentation and competitive exposure while also incurring costs that must be considered honestly in any financial calculation. For a coin with genuine characteristics placing it in the significant categories we've discussed, the authentication and auction process represents a worthwhile investment of both time and financial resources. For a coin whose characteristics prove on expert examination to be less significant than initial hopes suggested, the process still provides valuable education and prevents potentially costly mistakes, paying too much for an unattributed piece, or failing to recognize genuine value in a piece that deserves better research before disposition. The collector community that has developed around Lincoln Cent errors and varieties reflects some of the most collaborative, knowledge-sharing aspects of the numismatic hobby, and the specialist clubs and online communities devoted to this area provide resources that benefit both experienced collectors and those newer to this specific niche. I'd encourage anyone pursuing the coins we've discussed today to engage with these communities actively. The knowledge exchange that happens between experienced collectors examining the same reference material, discussing the same auction results, and sharing attribution discoveries is one of the most valuable aspects of the hobby that no solo research program can fully replicate. The 1987 D Lincoln Cent's place in modern numismatic history reflects a broader truth about this hobby that I find genuinely inspiring after many years of research and documentation, that value and significance exist in objects across every era and denomination, that the careful application of knowledge and systematic examination can reveal extraordinary worth in the most seemingly mundane material, and that the collector who approaches even a common-seeming penny with genuine curiosity and appropriate analytical tools occupies a more interesting relationship with history and material culture than most people ever achieve. These coins passed through the hands of Americans living through a specific moment in history, were produced by skilled mint workers operating sophisticated machinery under production pressure that created occasional extraordinary anomalies, and have arrived in the present as physical artifacts carrying both historical witness and documented numismatic significance that the right combination of knowledge, authentication, and market exposure can translate into extraordinary value. Thank you for spending this time with me examining these four remarkable Lincoln Cents, the 1994, 1993, 1988, and today's culminating examination of the 1987 D, and I sincerely hope the research and analysis we've shared today adds meaningful depth to your understanding of what makes specific examples of these familiar coins extraordinary rather than commonplace. If you have 1987 D Lincoln Cents in your collection, or any of the dates we've covered today, I genuinely encourage you to examine them with the systematic approach we've discussed. Seek professional authentication through PCGS or NGC for any piece showing significant characteristics. And bring your discoveries back to share in the comments below, where our community of serious collectors can engage with what you've found. Your experiences, your discoveries, and your knowledge are what make this channel genuinely valuable rather than simply informative, and I welcome every comment from collectors who bring their own expertise to these conversations. Please subscribe to The Coin Merchant if you haven't already. Share these videos with fellow collectors who deserve accurate, thoroughly researched numismatic content, and know that every piece of support you provide enables us to continue delivering the depth of analysis that serious collectors deserve. Until next time, examine carefully, authenticate thoroughly, and never underestimate what might be waiting in a coin you've held 1,000 times before.